A girl found something scary when she was peeping at her mother. She suspected that her mother might not be a human at all, because every time her mother went out, she would wear a bow. However, when she came back, she was exhausted. But the strange thing is that the bow was gone, and every time her mother came back, she had unwashed clothes. The strange scene in front of her made the girl very curious about her mother. So when her mother was washing the dishes, she asked where the bow had gone. She didn't know that her mother was going to break something impatient. She seemed to want to avoid this sensitive topic. However, the more curious the girl was about her mother's secret. The next day, when her mother went out with a bow as usual, the girl hurriedly followed her. However, what surprised her was that her mother brought her sick father here. Seeing that the two of them walked deep into the woods with a bow, the girl hurriedly followed them carefully. Unexpectedly, in the next second, she saw a terrifying scene. Her mother put an iron lock on her father. However, the strange thing is that her father said thank you to her mother to figure out what was going on. So after her mother left, the girl hurriedly dug into the crack of the iron door. Unexpectedly, she was found by her mother and anxiously asked her to get away from that place immediately. However, how could the girl listen to her? When she rushed over with the sound of the bow, she suddenly saw an extremely terrifying scene. In the next second, she only saw her original gentle father, who had become a ferocious werewolf at this time. At this moment, she was scared to death. Then she burst out laughing and fainted. Fortunately, her mother rushed to take her away in time, who knew that the next morning, she found her father sitting on the table in a trance, because she didn't know how to explain everything to her daughter. So in order not to leave her childhood girl and her grandfather, who loved her, she decided to find a time to secretly take her away from here. However, after her mother found out, she didn't hesitate to beat him to death. She even pushed her grandfather, who was old, aside. Then she blamed everything on her grandfather. After hearing this, her grandfather decided not to intervene in this matter, but it was impossible to keep hiding it like this. So in order to solve her daughter's doubts, the next morning, her father drove with her to the woods. Then he took his daughter to the abandoned castle that night. Then he told her a secret that he had never mentioned before. It turned out that there was a terrible mysterious curse that is, every full moon night, the man in the family would turn into a scary werewolf. For the safety of his family, he had to hide in this castle and let Xiame's mother lock him up with an iron chain. Because once he turns into a werewolf, he will become a monster who only knows how to kill and devour living things. That's why Xiame's mother would take a pig with her to go out every full moon day, and he used to want to leave, but his wife and daughter are everything he can't give up. Even if he becomes a beast, he also hopes to be with his family. When he found out that his father had become like this because of the curse, Xiame finally understood his father's difficulty. However, happy times are always short. There are always times when the pigs in the family are used up. With no choice, his mother had to take his father to the castle again. Then she tied his neck with an iron chain. They thought it would be safe and sound, but what surprised them was that the moon was unusually round tonight, and it was covered with very strange blood. After turning into a werewolf, no matter the power or the beast, it will reach its peak. So in order to prevent something terrible from happening, his grandfather and mother had to lock all the doors and windows. However, with the blood rising, the worst thing still happened. However, in the face of the fear and confusion of the mother and daughter, his grandfather could only explain that the sound of the door was wind blown. But this kind of regular violent impact was obviously caused by a human or some kind of beast. This made his grandfather's heart pound, and he raised his voice. He instantly realized that this was a failure in the process of transforming the werewolf. So in order to stop the werewolf from breaking in, his grandfather hurriedly closed all the doors and windows of the house. However, the werewolf didn't even pay attention to the windows and windows. In just a moment, his grandfather was hung by a powerful force on the wall. At this time, a huge figure slowly walked up the stairs. Seeing the werewolf slowly walking in from the outside, the mother and daughter hid in the cabinet and didn't even dare to breathe. Fortunately, the werewolves didn't find them, so the mother hurried to take the werewolves away. She immediately took her daughter out of the house and planned to drive away from this scary place. However, just before she left, her mother suddenly remembered that her grandfather was still in the house, so she hurried to let her daughter get in the car and hide. Then she rushed upstairs without saying a word, but when she wanted to get her father up, her father couldn't help but scream in pain. The woman instantly realized that this would definitely attract the werewolves in the house, so she hurried to open the floor and quickly took her father into the basement of the house. As expected, in the next second, the werewolves came to the top of their heads. Just when the two were about to leave quietly, the woman's hand suddenly pressed against the floor of the house. Hearing the movement, the werewolves suddenly made a loud noise. Fortunately, the basement was solid enough. This made the werewolves unable to come down for the time being. The two were in a hurry to climb out along the passage. However, the woman suddenly found out that the exit was blocked by an iron fence. Just when the two were desperate, her daughter suddenly hung an iron hook on the fence and immediately started the car to open the exit. The woman was in a hurry to get her father in the car, but just as they were about to start the engine and leave, they found that the car couldn't start. At a critical moment, her grandfather was in a hurry to make the mother and daughter leave as soon as possible, but she wanted to stay and use her own body to buy them time to escape. The woman knew that it was not a sad time at all, so she was in a hurry to run into the woods with her daughter. However, they still underestimated underestimated the werewolf's speed. Her father's old body couldn't hold back the beast for too long. Before the woman could react, the werewolves instantly grabbed from the dark night. The woman hurriedly followed the werewolves into a castle. Then she began to slowly approach the werewolves and tried to comfort each other in a gentle language. I don't know if it's because the werewolves still have the consciousness of a husband. The other party didn't attack them for the time being, but the woman still underestimated the curse. The next second, the beast's nature was restored. Suddenly, the woman was thrown to the ground, hurriedly took out the oxygen pipe on one side. Then the werewolves rushed over without hesitation. And with the fire, the crisis of the werewolves was finally resolved.